Well, hey, friends, welcome to the Everyday Mulemanship podcast, or maybe this episode, Candace, we should call it Donkmanship.
Okay, I'm down with that.
Yeah, we'll call it Donkmanship for this, but I got Candace. How do I say your last name correct?
Shauger,
Shauger? Okay.
Shauger. Yeah, yep,
Yeah, well, thanks for coming on. I've had a lot of people tell me about you, and my wife, Sky, she follows you on your Facebook, and so she's talked about you before. And we have a mutual friend in common, Lauren and Zach Coley. They're great friends of ours. We love them, and they just think you walk on the moon. I mean, they love you. So uh, it's anyways. You come with very very high regard, and um, another Shannon Hoffman.
yeah, yeah.
She talks
Well,
very highly of you. And
yeah, I must say that all those folks, it's pretty mutual. They speak very highly of you as well. So, but I am quite flattered that they would feel that way.
yeah, at the end of my podcast, I usually ask each guest, like, "Hey, do you got anybody that you recommend that I should come on the show or have on the show?" And when I had Lauren and Zach on the show, they recommended you. They said, "Oh, you got to get Candace on. You got to get Candace on." And they kept talking about you having these forward donkeys, and I love that they're
Yeah,
talking about forward donkeys because usually those two words don't go together, and so I'm like, okay, she's and and I've seen, yeah, Lauren had that Revy.
yeah,
Yeah, yeah, it was
yeah,
Revy that she got from you, and he unfortunately, he died, and it's too bad, but anyways, that was really cool. And he was a forward donkey. That was about the most forward donkey I've ever seen, and
yeah.
super impressed by that. And so, anyways, long story short, Candace, I'm glad to finally get you on the show and talk some donkey stuff. This is good.
Well, I'm very grateful to have the opportunity. It's kind of something that I evolved into later into life. My early days were spent had the great good fortune to grow up in the state of Maryland back in the 70s and 80s before it became very congested with a lot of suburbs. And at the time, it was horse country. We had fox hunting, we had thoroughbred racetracks, three or four of them within an hour of the house. So my start was most of my first paying jobs were on the racetrack. So I was very familiar with thoroughbreds. And so I laugh now if I could go and talk to my 20-year-old self and say, "You're going to spend the end of your days with donkeys." I wonder what kind of a reaction I get. But because I think because I came from that beginning, I've never been afraid of that kind of energy in a horse. And when I came into donkeys, and that was completely by random accident, the things that I looked for in donkeys was that forwardness. You if you are not afraid of it and you enjoy it, you kind of look for it in anything that you put a saddle on. And um, so it ended up being when I started getting jacks and getting uh, jennies in the course of uh, my life and working with these things. Um, I just kind of came up with the very simple concept of bringing two forward donkeys together, and that seemed to be quite a revolutionary kind of concept. No one had really asked that of donkeys before. Uh, Riding donkeys and competing donkeys in the show ring are relatively new to the horse industry, or the equine industry, I should say. And there was not a whole lot of people doing it. Finding a forward donkey was just a random accident. You could never predict which one would want to lope, would want to use itself in that way. So when my own opportunity to kind of breed these things came when I was probably in my 40s, it evolved. I don't know that I had an epiphany one day or a light bulb went off, but it did evolve into the point of, okay, so if I want a donkey that's forward, I need to bring two, forward donkeys together and see if this is something that you can breed for. And over the course of blending genetics for about 25 years, I'm starting to produce these donkeys that are like Revy, that are willing to use themselves in that way, and um, and that have the athleticism to kind of back it up. So um, it does seem, and I certainly don't want to present my animals as being always forward, but it does seem that you can kind of take the question mark out of it if you just kind of go with that very simple philosophy.
Just sounds like common sense.
Well, yeah, and I have been kind of walking along the beat of my own little drummer. I mean, I've kind of been isolated here in my own little kitchen for a long, long time.
Mhm.
And it seems like within the last 5 years, well, maybe six, it seems like with the production of these donkeys that are really forward, have that capacity, um, the endurance, and will use themselves in this way. They're attracting people who can appreciate it. They appreciate all the other things that come along with a good donkey, and that's that their capacity to think and remember and kind of extrapolate on things. So you get people who are talented and that come from horses and can appreciate that they're actually on an animal that is light, will step up into a lope, and then the added benefit of having all that cognition, that powerful brain that comes with the donkey. And so if you can get the right kind of people involved with these things, it's just fun to watch. It's just wonderful. And so that then, Lauren talks to a few other people, and a few other people that I have with these good donkeys start talking to their friends, and all of a sudden it just kind of organically, the word gets out. Um, so
Oh, yeah. So you said something. You said the right kind of people.
yeah.
So talk about that because I truly do think there are some people that would get along so much better with a donkey
Mm,
rather than a horse, or some people probably get better along with a horse than their donkey, depending on their
yeah.
personality. So tell me a little bit about that. What do you think? What do you think the best personality is for
Well,
a donkey?
I think, it may not be personality, but it may be perspective. I think that
Okay.
unfortunately you'll get people who have some skills, have spent their whole lives with horses or mules, and have tremendous skills. And they feel like they have to come at the donkey with those same kind of, maybe like a watered down version of what they've been doing with mules and horses. And what they don't understand is that a donkey is not a flight animal. It has developed its brain to suss out a problem. They have the capacity to remember. So I think what happens is that you'll get someone who comes from a background of a mule of a horse, and they approach the donkey with the similar kind of um, philosophy and training, and they expect the animal to they want to kind of capitalize on escapism, or that burst of energy, or the flightiness, uh, and you're not going to really find those things with a donkey. um, they miss over the most important part. They don't take the opportunity to engage with that animal right away, develop lines of communication. You don't have to worry about the explosiveness with the mule or the horse, where the thing is bucking the first time you put a saddle on it. It's torn down your fences. It's gone into the next 5 counties. You've lost your tack. None of that is going to occur. And I think they think, well, this animal, there's nothing here. This animal has nothing to offer me. When in reality, like I said, they've stepped over or walked past the most engaging part. Is that right away you can engage with that thing's mind, You can start laying down, the sense of, um, you know, here's a behavior I want you to exhibit. This is when I do this. This is what I need for you to do. I'm going to reward you by, alleviating pressure or, giving you some positive response. And that happens on the very first day. And, most of the time with horses and mules, you're trying to work down through all of that energy to get to that little nugget that's actually thinking. And that can take months. Whereas with the donkey, all of that is right there for you if you take the opportunity and you value that. If you don't value that, then, it is not for you. But on the flip side of that is that the most, the thing that you have to value the most and that you have to be the most careful of is its energy level. People want to get on, they want to, oh, this thing is trotting. I'm going to, trot it until it won't trot anymore. And in my opinion, the worst thing that you can do with a donkey is get it exhausted. If it's made those physical attempts for you and you've just run it where it absolutely refuses to go anymore, you'll have less to go back to, less it'll make less effort for you tomorrow. So, that's the flip side. I believe with donkeys, they are a complete 180 to the mule and the horse. You can take advantage of, the mule and the horse have unlimited energy, more than you have. And that's the thing that's the most precious with the donkey is you have to take care of them in that way. You can engage their mind, you can start teaching them things right from the beginning, but you have to be careful about how you spend their energy. If you don't spend it wisely, it won't offer that to you again because you've gotten it exhausted. It's tired, and they don't take well to that. So the forwardness, if you can accidentally come into a donkey that is forward and wants to trot out and wants to lope, then you take care of that. But you have that capacity to think and remember and to engage with you right from the beginning. And that to me is what's the most engaging part about them.
Oh, yeah. Everything you're saying, this is what I'm trying to get across to my students, because, a lot of people come from like what you're talking about. Hey, you know what? We're just going to get this thing really tired and then start to work at it. But, it's really this, it's really similar with horses and mules too, though. As soon as they're exhausted, you're out. You're out.
Yeah,
Like you that life in them is so precious. And it's no different with us too. Shoot, if you're tired or, exhausted and you're trying to read a book and learn something, it ain't gonna happen. I mean, maybe you
right.
read the book, but you ain't gonna retain anything. And man, that is so accurate with the donkeys. I mean, it's
Yeah.
just right there. One thing we teach a lot in our clinics, Candace, we call it soak time. So we'll ask, mule, horse, donkey, whatever, to do something, and when they come through with it, we leave them alone. And one of my mentors is Martin Black, and he always says, if you think you've waited long enough, wait a little longer. And that is so true with the donkeys too. Like give them that time to process, and it's really interesting. When you give them that time to just reflect and think about it, it's like you get more done by doing less. You give them that time to think about it.
Yeah. Well, the beauty of it is there, okay, with few exceptions, there are few donkeys on this world where you can't just tie it to a post, put a saddle on it, get on, and you're going to survive it. But you've missed every opportunity to develop, the capacity, a real relationship with this animal because they are
Yeah.
incredibly social. And I think that a lot of people take advantage of that docility or they don't use those behavior patterns like a mule or a horse where they use that explosiveness to, that this is a very uncomfortable situation for me and this is how I'm going to evade it. The donkeys don't use those things. They become dull, they sull up, they'll stand, they won't move. They use a completely different set of behavior patterns in response to something that they don't like. And so when someone who doesn't understand that this is, this is how they work, well, they're just completely turned off by an animal that just locks up. There's no reference point. They don't understand it. So they blame the donkey and they walk away. Whereas if you just take that time, their ability to learn is exceptionally fast. And because you don't have to work through um, those very physical avoidance behaviors, the bucking, the rearing, the shying away, the potential to get yourself killed, when you don't have that, to kind of work through, sometimes, not all of them are like that. Not all horses or mules are like that, but with the donkeys, you're able to go out and get all of the uh, more complicated concepts down very quickly. And then the other aspect of that is that their ability to remember, if you have shown them, yes, this is the behavior that I want from you, and you develop that reward, that release of pressure, whatever it is that you're going to use, and they start to work for that, things happen very quickly, and they have the capacity, if it's all done in a very positive manner, they will remember it. Where you get 60, 90 days on a donkey and you've got the thing going really well, you can put that thing away for 3 months and go out, and it's all right where you left it. What you have to redevelop is the endurance that you worked on during that 60 to 90 days, because that's the commodity that they are, less uh, gifted with. So you have to build up their wind, you have to build up their muscularity, all those things that weren't happening. But as far as the training, the things that you guys have communicated on, that you've developed, all the levels, all the concepts, it's all exactly where you left it. And again, that's another such a positive thing with them, that I think a lot of people don't appreciate. They don't take the time to understand that, because I think there are few people that have had the exposure to a donkey that is athletically forward and wants to use themselves in that way. So there's not many people that want to get on a donkey and spend 45 minutes walking. They want to do a little trotting, they want to do a little loping, they want to be competitive. So, um, and that is a rarity. Finding donkeys that have the physicality, that will attract people with a lot of skill. That. So that's kind of been my goal, is to you know crank out the factory and build as many as I can.
Yeah.
Uh,
Well, you're doing a good job. You're doing a great job. Another one of my students, Mike Webert, just bought a couple of
yeah,
donkeys from you,
he got a
and
couple of.
yeah,
Yeah,
he's really excited about it. You know, um,
well,
he's just stoked
yeah,
about it.
yeah. He bought two beautiful jennies for me this year, and gosh, I think he's just going to have a ball with them. I'm
Heck
very
yeah.
excited to see how those guys, how they develop together. So
So so I believe you said you've been breeding donkeys for 25 years now. Is that
yeah,
correct?
yeah, yeah. I had gotten, by accident, I had gotten three very fine jacks that were very genetically diverse, and we had collected those to make mules, and I was kind of in the mule making business there for a while, and then kind of evolved into getting a few jennies, and then I started working on the concept of building better saddle donkeys. Um, with my mule production, I always had to kind of bank on getting them sold by the time they were yearlings, because I was never capable of breaking them out myself. I would always have to send them out and get them broke to ride, and then to keep them going. Mules take a lot of work. You can't just can't mess around with it for a couple of weeks and then set it aside and come back to it, especially when you're just getting them started. So I got into the donkeys because that was something that I could break out myself. And then I found that, good saddle donkeys, that market is has been strong and has always stayed strong, no matter what the rest of the world was doing. Good saddle donkeys, have always there's always somebody looking for those. Um, but ultimately, those original three Jacks, which were a Jack's Elgato, Garrett's Jarrett's Desert Prince, sorry, and TJC Clyde. When I started blending the genetics of those three Jacks, and it was just 7 years ago, was the first time I ended up with one that had all three of those genetics in one animal. Um, and that was when I started my Genesis line, is what I call that. And those donkeys that all reflect that same pedigree, have that carry my brand. Those things are incredible. I started breaking them out, and day one, you throw a leg over and you're loping, and that uh, their physicality, their capacity to want to use themselves, they are really something else. So
Oh
I
yeah.
never would have predicted it. I never, it was just kind of this, I was in
Did-
search of the holy grail kind of thing. It just, this wild idea that I kept pursuing. And then when it really kind of bore fruit, I was just as surprised as everybody else. So yeah,
Well,
it was,
25 years is a long time. And, I just think about like myself and how much changes for what I do. I mean, I'm always changing, trying to be better. Next year's going to be different than this year. And 5 years from now, it's going to be totally different, I hope. What have you seen change over 25 years in your program that, I mean, I know you just mentioned you combined those three bloodlines, which is really cool. But
yeah.
what has changed for you, and maybe your eye for making them, or maybe some of your standards or some of your desires? What do you think's changed over 25 years for you?
Yeah, that's a really great question. And there's two things that I can think of that respond well to that question. One is what people are doing with donkeys and has changed in 25 years. I can remember when I first started competing donkeys, there weren't a lot of classes available for them, and they were at mule and donkey shows. And when I first would take donkeys in for like a rail class, I mean, there was always two or three donkeys that would just hang out by the gate. Maybe two or three that would actually get up into a trot. Um, Couple would lope, and maybe some of them had both gears, both leads, but it was very hit or miss. The quality of the donkeys was very hit or miss. Um, the kind of training that was being put on the donkeys was uh gosh, there were some people that were riding donkeys back then were really great horse people, great horsemen, great donkey people, had a lot of belief in what donkeys could do, and then they'd be riding in the same arena for somebody who was just kind of out stabbing and jerking, to try to get it to go. So now, when you go to mule and donkey shows, our association, which is the North American Saddle Mule and Donkey Association, our classes are very competitive. Those animals are framed up. They've got their ability to be accurate. They're getting their leads, and now donkeys are actually getting out and competing in the horse world. Several of the folks that I know, when they're not showing at association shows, uh, Western dressage, uh, working equitation. I've ridden in some ranch shows and been competitive. The donkeys are neck reining. They never used to neck rein, and now they're neck reining. And I must give a shout out to Lauren. Lauren is the one that kind of pushed me to step it up a little bit. She was getting her donkey Henry single reining very quickly, and I felt like, gosh, if Lauren can do it, then maybe I need to step up my own game and have that same expectation. And boy, it's been great. So because of that, you are able to get out and compete with horses, and be competitive. There's Um, you send a lot of people home sad when they get beat by a donkey, and there's a, you know, yeah, they don't take it well, but it sure is fun doing it. So
That's awesome.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So yeah, just in that capacity. Now, just in the competitive world. Now, in my own personal world, what I've seen change for myself in 25 years is the thing that I learned, and I've been very strict about with myself, is when I'm selecting stock to breed, I will choose that desire to be forward over anything else. I will take a hammer-headed, pig-eyed cowhock donkey if that thing will step up and lope and use itself and long trot and has the will to be forward. um, then I will take that thing over a halter Jenny, something that's anatomically beautiful. Because and the reason is that you cannot force a donkey to use itself if it does not have the will to do it. Now you can cultivate that desire. You can give it more endurance by building up its wind. Um, but you're if that thing is not gonna go out into the arena and guide and lope, willingly, it is not anything that can be forced. You just
Yeah.
it will not. You aren't. So, if in my own choosing and with my own stock, when I'm selecting, I'm looking for that Jenny that, wants to use itself. I can remember one of my mentors years ago, Tex Taylor. um, he always said that when he went shopping for donkeys, he'd take a 5-gallon bucket with him and he'd throw it out in a batch of donkeys. And it was the ones that ran off for the corners of the field that those are the ones he was interested in. And I'm all about it. He's dead on with that. Um, so
So
when you go
you
donkey
you
shopping, don't forget your 5-gallon bucket.
that's right. Yeah. So, something that just kinda struck me that I want you to elaborate on. I like how you said it, um, about their desire to be forward, that will to be forward. And something that I teach my students is to always build on your equine's strengths. Everybody wants to hammer on the bad stuff and get, the stuff they don't like. It's easy to get, tunnel vision on those things and try to think you gotta work on those all the time, but
Right.
I tell my students, "Focus on what the animal, is talented on, and the stuff that you don't like, it'll come along. It'll be alright."
Mm.
Talk about that a little bit because that seems to be a principle with the donkeys that has to be executed on. What do
Oh,
you think of that?
if you so and I always do try to emphasize it. And it's funny. Mike told me one time. He said that he was watching some of my videos, and he goes, "It seems like you're laughing a lot when you're writing these things." And that's because I do enjoy that. There's so much kind of communication involved in that, and if you don't have yourself open to that positivity in those areas in which they've responded well, but with the donkeys, if you start to apply too much pressure and you're not getting the response that you want, it's beholden to you to find a different way to approach. Uh, Donkeys can lock down pretty quickly. They can lock up pretty quickly, mentally and physically. And if you're um, if you're making it too uncomfortable for them, uh, it's going to continue to be a problem until you've figured out a different way to approach them and make it a positive resolution. Like, yeah, yes, this is the response that I was looking for, and to make it known to them that this is, you've released a pressure, however, whatever that is for you to create that positivity and to that positive reinforcement. Um, I um, it is a challenge. It is a puzzle sometimes when you get plateaued on something. You may have to go and work on something entirely different for a while, and then come back to it if it becomes a real block. But that becomes you become almost like a puzzle master sometimes. It's up to you to find a different approach. Um, you know,
Yeah, adjusting to fit the donkey. You know,
yeah.
uh, a principle that we teach, and you've heard this, especially in the horsemanship world. It's been around a long time. You know, Tom Dorrance coined it, Ray Hunt taught it, but make the right thing easy, wrong thing difficult.
Mm,
And you know, everybody's heard that, but I like to elaborate on it a little bit more. And instead of you know making the right thing easy, wrong thing difficult, I say focus on making the right thing easier. And so many people will hear that principle and they'll think, "Oh, well, I can make the wrong thing hard." You know, and they put so much emphasis on making the wrong thing hard or difficult. And it seems with our donkey friends, you really got to be good at making the right thing easier, or a better word might be making the right thing easiest. You know, got to make it easiest to choose.
yeah, and I think too sometimes I think sometimes where the problem results is that people spend too much time on a thing. Donkeys moved on. You know, uh, y- repetition is poison. That's the second biggest sin. If we're if you want to list sins, getting one exhausted is the biggest one. Number two is boring it to death. These things are bright. They're engaged. They've got it figured out. Let's develop it. Let's go on and let's do something else. And I can't tell you how many times. I mean, I've will introduce a new concept, to a donkey that I'm working with, and the next day I come out and that thing is connected the dots. And sometimes it's a little scary, but it's always wonderful. Uh, I understand that I am not getting. You're not going to go out and you're not going to lope that thing 6 times around the arena. I don't care which donkey you are. Now, maybe in 20 years, if I can, keep, you might have that. So you have to be satisfied or engaged or excited by the fact that this thing is doing all that mental work. So asking it to do something 10 times in a row, well, you should really quit like the third time. If it's given you near what you're wanting the first time you've introduced it, you get near it, and when you come back tomorrow, if you've left off in a good space for that thing, and you showed it that, yeah, you're on the right track, and you come back the next day, well, it's gonna do that well. It's and so the opportunity to go so much faster with these things once you get it, um, really thinking and engaged and working for you, once you've taken the time to develop that concept, you're not working on the same thing. uh, Repetition, like I said, repetition can be poison if you're not moving ahead and you've got some place to go with whatever it is you're working on.
Yeah, yeah. On that same note, I mentioned this earlier, but you know, if you're implementing that soak time and
Mm,
you're giving them that time between the reps, I find that to really accelerate the learning too. So, you know, let's just pick out your 3 rounds, you know. Well, like I'm not going to do those 3 rounds back to back to back. I'll do round 1 and then I might even just sit there for I mean, maybe literally 3, 4, 5 minutes. Just leave them alone and then do round 2 and then same thing, let them soak. And man, that has accelerated the learning so much versus, you know, like you're saying, doing I'd get more done doing 3 rounds over a period of 20 minutes than I would 10 rounds in 5 minutes. You know, I just and you think, well, geez, don't you got to do more? Well, no, yeah, let them. You know, it seems like when you let them soak a little bit, especially the donkeys, they just really think about it and they ponder it, and you know, and we got some cool science now to back us up. You know, these things used to just be hearsay. You know, we'd just be guessing, but shoot, now they can hook these MRIs and stuff, and they can see, well, hey, when you're letting them soak like that, those parts of their brain that lit up during the movement, during the engagement, well, they're lighting up now when they're just standing there. That
right.
tells us that that donkey is thinking about it while we're letting them soak. So you're getting the extra rounds without having to do it, so long as the
Yeah,
timing is right.
Yeah, exactly, and you're not continuing to, do it again and again because that thing is, he's moved on. And I must say, as far as sessions um, with the donkeys, my sessions always start out with just a quick walk. Like if we're under saddle, um, we'll do 5 minutes of walking, maybe not quite 10, to make sure I've got a steering wheel, and then we start right in with the high energy work. If I've got my good broke donkey, um, we'll do all our lope work first, and then once I start to feel like I'm he's starting to get a little fatigue, then we start working in. Then and then we might go in and do some obstacle work and come back and do our jogging work, our slow Western jog work, and then we can finish out by doing you know more intricate work like over obstacles, side passing, and things like that. But with the donkeys, the sessions might not be more than 40 minutes. Um, so time wise, because of their physicality, because they don't have the capacity, the endurance that a horse or a mule does. You do have to kind of shorten your time up with those sessions, or not quite as long with the donkeys as they are with the others. Um, so but always, even from that first session, their ability to focus in, and uh, that that is what is so different with them, with horses and mules, is you have to kind of go to where a mule or a horse is. With a donkey, they are intrinsically wired to be attempting to interact with that individual in their space right from the beginning. Um, and so, yeah, soak time is great, but you do have to be careful about the overall length of your session with them, um, just because of the fact that they don't have the endurance that, say, a mule would or a horse would. Um,
Yeah. Yeah, that's interesting. So, um, Sky asked me to ask you this because it's just kind of funny. So people always ask us, why do you have a donkey?
oh yeah,
And we've owned, I mean, nothing like you have, but we've had a few donkeys over the years, and at one time I was standing a couple jacks, and anyway, so we've had plenty of donkeys around, but people always ask, "Why do you got a donkey?" And she's like, "Ask Candace what she says because she hates that question." She's like,
well,
"Well, why not? Well, why not have a donkey?"
yeah,
But they
it's
they
funny.
ask it in like such a weird way,
Oh,
like
yeah, yeah,
as in
yeah,
like,
right away,
"Why?
they're
What?"
patronizing and demeaning, and yeah, I mean, I get that, and it's funny because I think that's probably why I've enjoyed isolating myself so much, because it's kinda like I feel like I've figured something out the rest of the universe hasn't, and I'm perfectly comfortable, just living in my own little kingdom with all these, brilliant athletic donkeys, but,
Mhm.
it is, I think that for someone to really appreciate all those things that we've been talking about with donkeys, their capacity, their cognitive abilities, um, it does take a special person. And if you are coming at them with the mindset uh, in which you think of them negatively, it is difficult to rewire people and to redirect them. But I would say I have appreciation for um, their ability to think, their ability to engage with people on a very direct level. They're very sociable, and when you add that, or you create an animal that also is athletic and will work in a forward manner, um, you're so grateful. If you've come from a horse or a mule background, you're so grateful for that added level of cognitive engagement. Um, but you have to that you have to appreciate that. And if you don't appreciate it, you're going to, you aren't going to like them. You are going to be patronizing. You are going to be, I'm wasting my time here with this thing. Um, so, it really kind of depends upon the person. As you well know, it does take special people to do well with any equine. There's a lot of people who try. There are a lot of people who probably shouldn't because they are very closed-minded and are not there for the right reasons. And ultimately, they blame the animal and never themselves. Um, those people are difficult no matter what. Uh, but when you come from that background, and I think some of the most amazing relationships or changes in concepts about or attitudes about donkeys come from people that I have known that have had great careers with horses and have always kind of been a little uh, off put by donkeys and think, oh, they're lowly, or that thing has nothing to offer me. And the first time they get on it and they find those things that I've just talked about, that ability to connect with that thing immediately, they make the best converts. I mean, I've seen old hard bitten horse people just fall in love with donkeys, and it's kind of funny to see them. They treat them like they're so precious, and I have seen that a couple of times, and I think it's wonderful. But it does take someone who's willing to kind of come at it with a different perspective and open up to it and appreciate those things that donkeys have will are able to provide, which is brains.
Yeah. Oh man. The word that keeps coming to my mind, Candace, as you're speaking, is humbleness. It seems like, if you're gonna get along with these guys, you gotta be humble. If you're a prideful person, if you're a person that kind of strives on, I guess, using fear or intimidation to work with an animal or with people. I mean, people do that with people, right? Um, if you're that type of person, you're not gonna get along.
No.
But, I've never really met anybody that's good with donkeys that isn't humble. They're all just good, like, meek, and just good people, I mean, you just hang out with them anytime, they'd be the first to invite you to come hang out at their campfire, they're just good people, and,
Well,
they get
I
along
don't
with
know
donkeys.
if anybody's ever accused me of being like that, but
Oh,
but
I don't know, I've heard great things about you. I mean, everybody
well,
talks so highly of you.
that's very kind of them. It's funny. Showing donkeys. There has not been one of us that have made a career out of showing donkeys that have not had that moment where you've gone in and you're like, "Oh, I've got this. We can do it." And it's the color of the pole, or the cutout that they use for the standard on the on the rope gate, or the color of the bridge, and you're not doing
Mhm.
it, and there's nothing that can be hoped. I mean, you just so the animal, I think, themselves keep you humble because
Yeah,
they truly are 50% of the proposition. You're there, you're asking. It's rarely is it I'm telling you. It's you've developed a real collaboration, and when you're in a show ring and you're competing, you're hoping that everybody's on the same page. Because it can quite quickly, all of a sudden your partner is like, yeah, no, I don't feel good about this at all. We're not doing it. So I think that alone is kind of what keeps us humble. You don't get too cocky.
yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
I like what you just said, you have to ask the donkey,
Mm,
you can't just throw your weight around and just boss them around, you gotta ask. And, I think that's a lesson that people could take. I mean, you could take it across the board on all equine, but in life,
mm.
ask,
Ask.
and it's so easy to sometimes get in the habit of just taking or just forcing, I
Yeah.
always, in a lot of my clinics, I will do a little kind of a mental test for these people. I'll hold my fist up and people listening to the podcast can't see me, but I'm holding my fist up so Candace can see it.
Yeah.
And I'll say, "Okay," and I'll pick somebody out of the crowd. I'll say, "Okay, try to open my fist." And every time they come up physically and they try to, open my fist up and they try as hard as they can. Some people kind of hurt my hand, I got to be kind of tough, and I'll go to the next person. I'll say, "Okay, do you want to try it?" And they'll try to pull my thumb or twist something. And it's interesting because as I go around the circle, it seems to have to reach a point of like people are trying to find the pain, like the pressure point,
Yeah.
and then finally somebody says, "Will you please open your fist?" And I open it up.
Right.
The first person, all they had to do was ask. It's interesting. The human nature it always escalates from that first person.
Right.
Like I haven't had a clinic yet where somebody asked me right off the bat, unless there's repeats. If there's a repeat student, I say, "Okay, you be quiet," because I like to let the people figure it out. But it's such a concept. Just ask, you
Yeah.
know.
Yeah. And truly, I think that with the donkeys, that is the thing, the goal on those initial interactions with the donkey when you put one into training. It is um, here establishing that sense of communication with them, because you are going out there and you're going to be modifying their behaviors. That thing is going to accept a saddle and a bridle, and you're going to ask it to turn this way and turn that way. And when I have this body position, we're going to go off into a trot or a lope. This is all, and all of that is based on the very initial interactions with them of, this is a simple thing I'm going to ask you to do. It's maybe step a hip over, and then it's all built from that. And it is about getting them to do it, not getting them to do it, but asking them to do it in a sense of cooperation and collaboration. And I'm going to do it just simply because you clucked, not because you engaged with me in any kind of physical way. So it is about always having that positivity, but taking the time with donkeys. With horse people, it's kind of like, well, he's calm, so I'm going to get on it. It's kind of like, well, it looks safe, so I'm going to go there. And all those steps that you've bypassed, and I know I kind of repeating myself, but that if you don't take the time to develop that ask, that collaboration, that cooperation with any horse or mule or donkey, um, they'll find ways to be oppositional. And with the donkeys, they sull up, they don't respond, they don't move their feet, they don't. They're making no effort for you whatsoever. That's the thing that's so quite different about how they become oppositional as opposed to a horse or the mule. The mule or the horse can be more violent. They can be more explosive. They can learn how to jerk away. They have their own tools that they use. The donkey becomes very, and I think that's where people misinterpret them. It's not that they can't. It's not that they don't have the understanding. And I think that's where you know many horse people come into them and make their first missteps, is that they don't take the time to engage that part, and
Yeah.
develop that cooperation and that willingness to want to work along with you. You're a good person. I enjoyed that time we spent together yesterday. It went well for me. Is kind of the donkey's perspective. So we're gonna do some more. You know, I'm here with you. And if you don't develop that friendship or cooperation or that collaborativeness, you miss out on so much. But you have to be able to kind of set aside all those things. Gosh almighty, when I go back, there was one donkey that taught it all to me, and that was the very first one I ever tried to break. Um, it was a jack that we had bought. We thought we would get into the mule business, so we went and got a jack. His name was Ajax Elgato, and he was a bad boy. And when he was 2, he would not be led. He was aggressive. He was your typical bad jack that people always are, warning you about. So I thought, well, I've got to give this thing a job. I'm going to put a saddle on it and we're going to go for a ride, and I'm going to, teach it. I'm going to break it like broke all the horses in my life, and man, it was bad. It was terrible. I have learned all this stuff by mistakes, and
Mhm.
I sound all wise and knowledgeable now, but I can tell you every aspect of learning these things about donkeys was because I screwed it up the first time. And fortunately, this donkey was very forgiving. And when I started figuring things out, he was, yeah, this is yes, okay, yes, Candace, you moron. This is how you need to approach things. And fortunately, he was incredibly athletic as well. He ended up being a heck of an athletic donkey. He was a great loper. He was used himself beautifully. He was a terrific donkey to ride. Um, and that was unfortunate in the sense that I expected all donkeys to be like him. And so then I then it dawned on me what a freak of nature he was uh, when I started, getting on other donkeys and realizing that no, a lot of them don't want to use themselves this way. Most of them don't. So
So, I'm as you're telling me this, I'm thinking about, like, what 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 are some of the roots of these donkeys that are a little bit more forward? Like, when you're coming across these donkeys that have this forwardness, like, what are the roots of those? I'm talking, like, way back, like, where'd they come from? Do you
yeah,
know? Do you got any idea?
well, I think my experience, and it may not be, my experience is that you get a lot of that more forwardness from the mid-size, like the standard size donkeys. They seem to be a little bit more uh, athletic and willing to use themselves. And so when you start blending that with some of the with the taller donkeys, um, you can kind of bring that along. One of the things that I have found is that um, the mammoth donkey, people want to, they want to call me up and they say, I want a mammoth donkey, to ride. And mammoths are a breed of donkeys, and they were developed for the production of draft mules. So they were never really selected for athleticism or being forward. There's a, is there they've got a whole breed um, parameters that they use, size, color, um, that they have to meet the criteria for the breed to be registered with that association. But being forward and being good saddle donkeys was never one of them. So, I think people make the mistake of seeking, good saddle donkeys out of mammoth, the mammoth breed. Yes, they have the size, but generally, they don't have the athleticism or the muscularity, or never have they been selected for that. So I think blending the genetics of, the standards along with some of the larger ones um, has kind of brought that forward. But it is still pretty rare. I mean, you'll get a lot of donkeys that are not forward, and from a variety of different backgrounds. Um, but I would say that the standard donkeys, the smaller ones, are a little scrappier, a little more energetic. Um, at least that's been my experience with the ones that I've had. Um, but good saddle donkeys come from a very wide variety of donkeys.
Mm.
They're it is not a breed. It's kind of a style of donkey. It would be like saying ranch horse. Ranch horses can come from a variety of different backgrounds. Um, but I think people need to understand the difference between what the concept of a saddle donkey is, and it can come from a variety of different backgrounds. And then when you talk about the mammoth breed, yes, they're tall, but they, for the most part, have not been bred or selected for being good riding animals. So you have to go carefully there. That is a common mistake that people make.
Yeah, but that's interesting, you saying the mammoths, their focus was for making draft mules, and that makes so
Yeah.
much sense. Um, like, here in America, in the US, nobody really has a finger on any breeds. It's getting better. People like you and others that are, like, developing bloodlines, And people recognize these bloodlines these days. Some of
Mm.
them, but I got some students in Europe, and they're all about their breeds. They got their donkey breeds, and they're much more pure in their breeding. I guess keeping it organized than us. We're like, it's a donkey. Well, what kind of donkey? I don't know. It's
Well,
everything. It's a mix of everything, right? Our American donkey is really a mix of so many things.
it is, the saddle donkey is, because it's a completely different concept. Even over in Europe, they've got the Andalusians, they've got the Catalonians, um, but they're really not riding donkeys, even those, the ones, and I must say that there are some breeds that their physicality would lend themselves to being much better saddle donkeys than, our own American mammoth. Um, but they're really not riding over in Europe. They're not really riding their donkeys either. They use them for still using them for a lot of is mule production. Um, so
Meal production and driving. I see a lot of them driving. They
yeah.
like to drive the donkeys. A lot of
Hmm.
carts.
Hmm. So yeah, it's kind of interesting. When I first started out 25 years ago, there was a real sense the old traditional breeders that had the mammoth herds. Um, they were hung up on color. They were hung up on ear length. They were hung up on bloodlines. And it was funny when I first started showing. I'll never forget. When I went to the Kentucky State Fair. It was me who had my saddle donkey, and it was all by myself. I led my jack in, and then it was the rest of the class were these old jack stock breeders, and they had two people on each jack, and they, had the lighters underneath their noses to get their ears to prick up, or they'd use a clipboard, and it was I think back on it now, because most of those guys have gone away, and now it's about saddle donkeys. It I wished I had, I wish I had, my iPhone then. I could have taken a bunch of pictures, because it really was kind of like, the old guard. It was the old guard going, and now there's kind of the industry has kind of gone in a completely different direction. Um, but I think I think if we keep going in this direction and people become wiser about choosing which jacks that they use on their genets, and I wish they would. I wish that some of the criteria that they used was, okay, has someone, will this thing lope out? Can someone ride it? Will it sustain a trot? Is it good in a cart? Is it forward enough to go out in a cart? Um, I wish that if I could kind of leave this conversation with the concept of people choosing more athletic jacks for their jennies and breed their jennies and be interested in that part of it, so that they can become part of, where the industry is going, and so that it's, sometimes I feel like it is just me. um, I wish there were more people who would say, I'm going to choose that jack because that, look, they're able to ride it, and they could take it out on trail ride, and look, it's trotting, and it's picking up its leads, and that's who I want to breed my Jenny to, because I want, that's the kind of donkey that I want. Um, just getting that kind of concept out there.
No, I think you're doing a good job at that. A lot of people you're influencing. I think that's if you leave something here on this earth, I think it will be that. And
I
then
hope.
after we publish this, there's going to be 120,000 other people that know about it too. So, that'd be good.
I hope so. I think it's, I think the concept of being able to select for forwardness, I feel like I have proven that.
Yeah.
You can select for that trait. So I hope that, I hope that's kind of a takeaway for people. Um,
You need to write a book.
oh,
Because there's no good donkey books out there, there's just not, there's nothing really great that's outstanding that's totally like what we're talking about here. You gotta do something like that. You got a lot of knowledge. It'd be good to pass it on.
well, I don't know. I'm not sure how. I'm not really good at taking compliments, Ty. But thank you.
So, like in
I
in the in the horse world, in the horsemanship world, at least what I've been around, a lot of people take a lot of pride in their studs, and
Mm,
they will prove their studs before they put them on their mares.
right.
Meaning this stud's gonna be broke. They're gonna be riding it, using it, roping off of it, and they're gonna prove it to make sure that it's worthy to
Mhm.
have babies.
Yeah.
And but you're right. In the donkey world, it just don't see much of that. Like, oh, it's a donkey. Oh, cool. It's a jack
Yeah.
is a jack. They think
Right.
and there's when I was a young man growing up riding mules for a living, for the public. There was a local breeder, and he had a couple different jacks, and it was interesting because I ended up training probably I mean, honestly, probably 3 or 400 colts from this fella. Okay. And over the years, I started keeping track of which jack and which colt, which jack, which colt. And there was a whole line of colts out of a particular jack that every one of them bucked. I mean, every one of them. And I'm like, okay, it's not a coincidence. This isn't a coincidence here. All this line is producing this particular temperament, and
Mhm.
this line is producing this particular temperament. There's a reason behind that, but in that guy's program, it was just another jack. A jack's a jack. Like, well, that's a donkey. We need a donkey. And here in Utah, donkeys are really hard to come by. Nobody. I don't really know anybody in Utah raising donkeys. Part of that's probably due to all the BLM donkeys we have. There's a huge influx. You go get a BLM donkey for 25 bucks, and
Right.
so that's probably why there's a big flood of that in our market. But yeah, I wish more people would prove, kind of have a higher set of standards like you're talking about. I think it
Yeah.
would change the donkey world, but it changed the mule world too.
Oh, yes. Yes, all the same attributes that I, value in my own stock are all the things that, someone who is producing wants a good top shelf mule I is gonna be interested in, like the jacks that the current jack that I'm riding now, there's he's the only one that's showing under saddle in our association right now. There's a reason for that. People just don't understand that there's a way to handle jacks. They're different. But I've had 5 out on the road in my career. And that is one of the criteria. There was when I can remember one of the things that I always started when I started with my marketing was that I wanted to show all my jacks under saddle in the pictures. I wanted to show these things were getting out into the world and that they were tractable. They were they were good minded. Um, they were animals that could be disciplined. Um, and behave themselves out in company because that's a big ask for most jacks. Um,
Mm.
and then for me now is to be able to I use a lot of pictures of my jack that he's out competing against horses or he's competitive against horses. He's uh, so all of those things that are good for a good saddle donkey are going to lend themselves to someone who really wants to produce good quality mules. um, all that helps. uh, for myself, I've really kind of like toward the back end of my life now. I'm 66, and I can kind of see where I need to wrap this up at some point. So I really kind of want to go out solely with the emphasis on, pushing these saddle donkeys as far as I can go. I used to um, breed mules, breed for mules. Then I was standing my jacks to people who wanted to use it. Now it's just kind of like, I really just kind of want to focus on the saddle donkeys because, the beauty of a saddle donkey, the other aspect of a saddle donkey is that you can reproduce them. They are not sterile. You can breed one to a Jenny and you can develop, you can create, you can have a genealogy and a pedigree and um, um, hopefully step them up as you go forward.
Oh yeah. I was looking at your Facebook page before we jumped on here, and man, what some good looking donkeys. I mean, some really good looking stuff, you know. So I know you're breeding for these traits like forwardness and stuff, and and I think your joke about, you know, you don't care if they're cowhocked and whatever. Hey, act no, you are breeding some good looking donkeys, and they are put together.
It's funny because I think, I think form follows function.
Yeah.
I think that to be athletic, um, you have to be built right. But I have found in my lifetime that I have had some beautifully constructed donkeys who would not come up out of a walk. So that's why I have to say to myself, if I've got a choice between two Jennies and that one runs from the bucket and that one doesn't, I'm going to go with that girl that runs from the bucket. So, um,
Forward first, huh?
forward
That's the
first.
standard. Forward is always first.
But yes, it's funny because I do now. I mean, I've brought people out and showed them my herd of Jennies that are second and third generation from where I started, and they are kind of developing their own physical attributes, which are different from some donkeys. I've had some people say, "Well, your donkeys don't even look like everybody else's donkeys," and I would say, I know we're getting a little long here. We're at 2 hours, but if people were out shopping for donkeys and they wanted to pick something that is going to lend itself better to being ridden, is just be strict about it. Look at a profile. If that thing's bigger on the front end than it is on the back end, then it's missing out all of those physical parts that are going to make it a good saddle donkey. Its head is bigger than its rear end, which is a common flaw with donkeys. So you want to look for something that's got a big hip. You want to look at something that is smooth over the back and doesn't have the standing spine. If it's got a spine that's sticking up there, it means that it's lacking the muscle, that longissimus dorsi muscle that goes on either side of the spine, which helps propel that thing forward. Um, you want to look at something that's really broad through the chest, because if it's narrow, and some donkeys look like they've got their front legs coming out of the same hole, well, that means its rib cage is small and there's not a lot of lung or heart capacity there to breathe. Um, some donkeys come with a very small diameter nostril, and you want to look for something that's got a good flare in its nostril so that it can take oxygen in. Simple things like that. Um, those kind of choices when you're out donkey shopping, um, I think would help people to make uh, better purchases. And don't forget your 5-gallon bucket.
That's right. Take the bucket. Take the
Take that
bucket.
bucket.
Hey, I want to shift gears a little bit. I really wanted to ask you about this and hear your input because I followed it a little bit on social media.
Oh yeah,
You and Lauren and Sarah, y'all did a showdown at the throwdown,
yeah.
and that looked fun. And the three of you made this competition up and decided to go at it and have some fun. So tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah, that thing was born. It wasn't even a year ago. We had a situation. It kind of evolved where um, Lauren had just lost her donkey Revy to just a fluke accident during its castration, and she was really in the dumps. And I had known about Lauren's capacity to train. I mean, she's just brilliant. And Lauren is really kind of gifted. She's kind of the first person that I've seen that has kind of brought her her natural horsemanship uh, abilities into uh, kind of melded it with donkeys, what she knows about donkeys now. And so, and then Sarah, I've known Sarah for a long time. She's a very quiet person, but Sarah has got the ability to bring one along so beautifully. I've seen her train a few donkeys. So I had kind of, I've known these two, and poor Lauren was such a sad person, and Sarah is this donkey shopper. I mean, she finds these things on Craigslist, and she started sending me pictures, and she sent me a picture of these three donkeys, and it just kind of like was a light bulb moment. I thought, hey, why don't we do a donkey training competition? And I was hoping that it would, help Lauren get past her loss and bring Sarah kind of um, out of this kind of quiet place where she was, and then it just kind of grew from there. It started out as a picture that Sarah sent me of these three donkeys, and she goes, "What do you think of these?" And I thought, I think we need to have a training competition. It was just so bizarre. And we were I kind of had these conversations with them, and I said, okay, so if we do this, there are a couple of things that we need to make sure that we do. And one is I kind of want to lift the veil on what it is to train donkeys successfully. I want to be able to show people all the steps because it seems like it's been such a mystery for so long. No one's been, and I want it to be about not just starting a donkey, putting a saddle on it, and walking in a circle. I want to take these things to where we're really competing them, um, so that people can see that you can have an expectation and you can get it there in a relatively short amount of time, and that they are quality broke. Um, so I have known Bill Garrett for an awful long time, and Bill has more donkeys than you can shake a stick at. I thought, well, if anybody can set us up with three wild donkeys, it's going to be Bill Garrett. And he was totally on board after he got Gina's permission. And and away we went. And it just kind of evolved as we went along. I mean, we didn't have it all structured out from the beginning. It just kind of grew as we needed it to. And to have three people with a fairly different perspective on how they do it, and yet we all resulted with three really well broke donkeys, I think was part of the beauty of it. There's not just one way with anything. Um, we're all three very different personalities, and yet I think what was so special about this is that we were so collaborative all along. We communicated well. We got together frequently. If we had problems, we talked about it. We all talked through how we were going to do steps of this thing. Um, so I think that was another very special aspect of it.
Yeah, that's really cool. And it all accumulated and finished up there at the throwdown in what, South Carolina, is that correct?
Yeah,
Or
the Carolina Throwdown was something that I'd put together about 5 years ago. The North and South Carolina state fairs are geographically very close, and then they hold them within just a few days of one another. So the concept was with the association members, if they showed at both shows, then there was kind of a special award, a cash award that resulted if you showed at both shows. And depending upon which division you were in. So we used that as an opportunity to kind of final up the showdown, where we took the donkeys, we competed under two different judges at each fair, and then whoever accumulated the most points between the three of us was the winner of the showdown, and that was Lauren. And then Sarah came in second, I came in third, but we had to show at two different shows. We had to show under two different judges. Um, it's kind of a rigorous deal. You get there, you show at North Carolina, you have to pack up, you drive down to South Carolina, you show there for 2 days. So it's pretty rigorous for the people and the animals. Um, and it was a lot of fun. People came just to see us with the donkeys. That was really fun, rewarding to find out that people were like, "Hey, we came to see these showdown donkeys," and so that was
nice.
great. And then, and what was so surprising was that not only did we find we competed against one another, but we competed against other donkeys, and we were consistently one, two, three in the class. Didn't matter
Nice.
who else was in there, and that was really wonderful.
Yeah, that's way cool.
Yeah, it
Yeah,
was
that
very cool.
and then at the end, do I understand right, you guys sold the donkeys? I think Lauren bought her own, but did you and Sarah sell yours?
Yeah, we did. We had them through an online auction. It was Professional Horse Incorporated. great auction company. That was Shannon Hoffman had recommended them. She's personal friends with Mike and Stephanie Jennings are the ones that own that, and they did a great job. They held our hands. They because we didn't know what we were doing. We were super stupid about the whole thing, and they really were very supportive. Walked us right through it. Had us all set up, and it went off without a flaw. And uh, my Jenny Halo, who turned out to be such a phenomenal donkey, ended up with a good friend of mine who's going to show her and then put her in her breeding program. And then Sarah had sold her gelding, Sweet Harvey, to a gal who'd been looking at buying a saddle donkey for a long, long time and had never pulled the trigger. And so she got Sweet Harvey. And then Lauren, who's the worst donkey seller known to man, failed miserably and kept Amos, which is a riot, which is perfect. I mean, no one else should have Amos, but Lauren. Um, but it was
Yeah,
great.
she's a collector. She's a collector.
Oh yeah, yeah, she is. She's a hoarder. But I can't fault her for that. And I wish I could keep all of mine too, but you can't feed the big bulldog when you're keeping them all. So
Yeah.
you
Well,
just
that's
hope
pretty
and
cool.
pray. You hope and pray that good people like Lauren and Zach and several other people now have gotten some of my good donkeys, and I'm just so grateful that they've given them the lives that they've given them. Um,
Oh yeah.
yep.
Oh yeah. Last year we stayed at Lauren and Zach's, and actually we did a podcast with them while we were there. So a lot of my listeners know about them, but we went and ran through the corn with them and their donkeys, and
And you
it was a
play donkey
blast.
golf, from what I understand. I am the
Yeah,
mother
we
of
did.
donkey golf too.
Oh yeah, that's right. Yeah, good old donkey golf. That was a blast.
Yeah. Yep. I'm quite proud of that invention.
Well, hey Candace, I got one last question for you. I ask all my guests this at the end of the podcast. Um, if you could leave one word of advice, one piece of advice to our listeners today, um, that are going through life, going through this journey, whether it's with donkeys, mules, horses, or just life, what's a piece of advice you'd like to give them?
Oh, find joy in the small things. If it's the softness of a donkey baby's hair, if it's that soft blow that you get on the side of your face from one that you're spending time with, just find that capacity to find joy in the simple, um, quiet moments that you have in this world. Um, that would be it.
Man, that's great. That's great advice for just anything. That's so good.
Mm.
That's so good. Life would be a lot better for a lot of people if they'd take that advice.
Well,
Find joy in the little things.
yeah, it's the little things, and just the sunset, the quality of the sunset. Just any small thing, and I think that that silly game that I came up with, donkey golf. For me, when I watch others play that game, to hear adults laugh like children again is music for me.
Yeah.
Uh, we forget, that abandonment that we had when we were children, and the sheer joy of laughter. Um, that that's the beauty of what happens in that game.
Oh
So
yeah. Yeah, that was a blast. That was a blast. Thanks for inventing that.
yeah, you're welcome.
Well, hey Candace, thanks for joining me on the show today. I'm gonna give a shout out to my sponsors. Big thank you to Roman Home Tents, my buddy Ben Lewis over there, Colt Saddlery, Western Mule Magazine, Mules and More Magazine, Diamond W Enterprises, and of course, Boyd Ranch Mule Days. Big shout out to all those that make this podcast free for you guys to listen to. So, with that, thank you, Candace. Appreciate you.
You're very welcome, Ty. It was a pleasure.
Heck yeah. God bless you guys, and we will see you down the road.